We are thrilled to be joined by Charlie Potter, the Alabama beat reporter for BamaOnline.com, part of the 247Sports.com network. Charlie, of course, embedded with the Crimson Tide this week down in South Florida. Charlie, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, man.
So where are we at in the proceedings? I guess we had the sort of ceremonial photo op coaches press conference this morning. Is that where we're at in all this, Charlie?
Yeah, that happened, about 3 hours ago, and not much was said. You had some dumb questions. And they, about 20, 25 minutes, they took their photos together with handshakes and oranges, and I know Alabama will have a walkthrough today, but that's closed. So that was really, outside of the media party, that was the only obligation we had today.
Yeah, it's time to play the football game, finally. And I guess in some aspects, the time seems short, right, from the Alabama perspective for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the health of Tua Tagovailoa and that surgically procedure repaired, I guess you could say, left ankle. But then the news of Deonte Brown, too, being suspended for this game. As the week has worn on, first of all, what's the vibe you get with Tua's health? And then secondarily, this situation with Deonte Brown and how it might impact this team not only tomorrow night, but into the 2019 season, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some big news this week, and the suspensions dropped on Christmas Eve night, which is not really what you want. But Nick Saban talked about them yesterday at Alabama's media day, and said that these were NCAA violations, which initially they were violations of team rules and policies, but he cleared that up, and they're suspended for this game, the rest of the season, and maybe beyond, he said. So that's this is a big deal, and something that obviously we'll be covering in the off season and how things go with that. But Deonte Brown didn't travel to Miami. Neither did Elliott Baker or Kedrick James, but Elliott Baker hasn't played in the game this season, and James has been a reserve tight end in 5 games. So, the big news there is Brown, and that affects an offensive line that had been playing well, was a finalist for the Joe Moore Award, and I think is a little bit better unit with Deonte in there. But he's not going to be playing this game if they win the next one, and Lester Cotton is going to be the starter. He's a guy that started plenty of games at Alabama, has experience, and I think the good news for this one is, Alabama's not going to be facing the defense, like they faced in Atlanta and Georgia, or other teams like Auburn, LSU. Oklahoma's obviously not known for their offense, and they'll be able to hold things up against this team. It's just a matter of looking ahead. What happens if they win this game and match up with a team like Clemson that's known for their defensive front. Obviously, Clemson's having some suspension issues of their own, but it's going to be a storyline to watch moving forward. But it seems like every day, we've had interviews, a lot of them down here, and that Tua update has been provided, and he kind of made headlines earlier in the week when he said he was about at 85%, but that he maintained that that's how he's feeling. He was being honest with it. That's what he said yesterday at Alabama's media day. But around that, that's the quote that gets put out there and tweeted. He says that he's made a tremendous amount of progress, and he maintains that the expectation is that he'd be 100% in the game and be able to play. And talking to Jeff Allen, he said he's doing really well. And for people that go out there and watch practice, and that's something that you and I have talked about just from watching Tua, he didn't have kind of that, the limp or he was moving around gingerly like we saw from Jalen Hurts afterwards. Tua has been moving around really well, and it hasn't really been limited by the injury. And that's the good news. And, Nick Saban was pretty positive, too, and just what he was talking about. Said that he's had a good week this week, and being able to move around in the pocket and do some things. And so it's going to be something we're going to watch until kickoff. But Tua's going to play. It's just a matter of how effective he'll be and what percent he's going to be at is going to be the thing to watch.
And speaking of percentages or chances, with Tua's situation being what it is, what's your expectations for Jalen Hurts potentially in this game? Do you think there's a good chance we see Jalen regardless of whether or not Tua holds up, even on a situational basis? Where do you sort of put that at with Jalen going into this game, Charlie?
I mean, that's outside of the injury. I think that's the other big thing is just does Jalen play at all? Because we saw even before Tua left the game when he came back in after the first series after he sprained his ankle and tried to fight through it. We saw it was in an awkward situation too. But we saw Jalen come in for a couple of plays like we've seen in earlier in the season with him in the slot and with him at quarterback with Tua on the field as well. And so that's always a possibility. Clearly if Tua's not 100%. And they could lean on Jalen a little bit. If he's not 100% retweaks that ankle, then Jalen's going to be a guy that they'll lean on heavily and be the guy they put behind center. But I think his involvement overall with a pretty close to healthy Tua will be something interesting to watch. And it was something that the coaches got asked about today, not Jalen specifically or anything like that, but just surprises. And Alabama has plenty of plays up its sleeves, and we heard from Nick Saban when we first saw that double, quarterback package of, they have a lot of things that they'd like to run out of that. So that's always a possibility. And I just think it's tough to put a percentage or number of snaps of what we think we'll see from Jalen. But, with the way that he played in this last game, how we've kind of seen him mixed into the offense during the season, and then with Tua's injury, it would be kind of surprising to not see him at least on the field for one snap or two.
Charlie, given that we saw Alabama in practices leading up to the SEC championship game and then into college football playoff preparation seemingly ramp up Terrell Lewis coming off that ACL injury back in the summer, were you surprised to learn that he's been ruled out entirely for this college football playoff? No,
he has looked good, but that, like Nick Saban said, that's just the next step in his process. And I think that's good news for a guy that he's kind of had some injury issues in the past. To let him get healthy, let him get out there and be basically full speed for spring ball. I know they'd love to have him. He's a freak pass rusher. But it wasn't that surprising to me to hear that. Like I said, I went and talked to Jeff Allen because injuries have been a really big story this year, just with what Tua's gone through. And, they had a couple of guys that tore ACLs before the season started, and we've seen them at practice and seemingly not limited at all. But he said that, they're not trying to set records with guys getting back on the field. Jeff Allen said this. And, he says that for a guy that to play at a high level and be basically 100%, it takes close to a year. There's some rare cases. We've seen them all across the NFL. Adrian Peterson is one everybody talks about. And certainly when we talk about freak athletes, especially around Tuscaloosa, Terrell Lewis is near the top of that list. But I think if they want to get him fully healthy, they'll give him some more time to heal and won't rush him back to a game, even if it is in a limited pass rushing situation. But a lot of people were excited about that. And that's kind of a downer. But the big news, and even a lot of people say, well, was he really considered, is that Terrell Lewis said he's going to be back next year. He's a guy that it was considered a high draft prospect entering this season. And obviously has changed with him not being able to play and with the injury situation. So, even though he's not going to play in this game, and we haven't really heard about, the national championship game, that's nothing Nick Saban isn't talking about. But if he doesn't play in this game, Alabama fans will know that they'll be able to see him in crimson next season, and that's something for a defense that could lose a lot. That's good news for sure.
Talking with Charlie Potter, the Alabama beat reporter for BamaOnline.com on a Friday edition of Southern Fried Sports presented by Carty and Lloyd Attorneys at Law and Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa. All right, Charlie, I've got some totals, some predictions for this game I'm going to throw at you. I want to get your thoughts on them, so here we go. Between the two teams tomorrow night, no fewer than 17 points will be scored in the first quarter. I'm setting that total basically at about 16.5. I think there's 17 or more. What do you think? Is it going to be sort of that score fest from the outset that so many are expecting tomorrow night, in your opinion?
I mean, I think that's a pretty safe bet. I mean, you have the nation's top two scoring offenses, and we've seen Alabama, this season just get off to really hot starts. They're able to score quickly. You just look at the first half. Tua has thrown 27 touchdowns in the first half of 13 games against a defense that doesn't really stock the ball well in either phase, you think Alabama could probably score 17 points alone. So I think that's a really safe bet. You could probably crank the number up a little bit, honestly, just because of how Alabama is able to score quickly. And then, with the guys on the other side of the ball with Kyler Murray and company, they do too. So I think it could. I think just in this game alone, you could see some quick strikes, some early punches, and maybe you see an Alabama defense settle down later to keep that in check a little bit. But I think from the outset, like you said, we can see a lot of scoring.
Here's another one for you, Charlie. I've got Alabama with 2 100-yard receivers in this game. Again, when we talk about statistics, looking at Oklahoma defensively against the pass, there isn't a worse pass defense in all of FBS football. Alabama's done it 3 times this year, but it's been a while. You have to go back to Louisiana Lafayette, Arkansas, and Missouri. That stretch there, late September into early October, 3 straight games Alabama had 2 receivers go over the 100 mark. Now, what makes this an interesting proposition is that Alabama's depth is such that it isn't reliant on just 2 guys, maybe like the way that Oklahoma is, perhaps. But I've got 2 over 100 in receiving yards tomorrow night for the Crimson Tide. What do you think, Charlie?
I think that's probably another safe bet, just because, like you mentioned, Oklahoma has the nation's worst passing defense. They're giving up more than 290 yards a game, and just from averages alone, that you look at it and you think that a healthy Tua, if he's able to stay in the pocket and throw it around, he's going to have 300 yards with relative ease. And if that's the case, then I know they do spread the ball around, but with guys taking quick slants and running into the house, you could have 2 guys easily reach that. If not, you get 3 in the ballpark. And you mentioned with Oklahoma, they have 2 top receivers, but any of these 5 Alabama receivers, including tight end Irv Smith, they can do it, and they have done it, like you said, 3 times this season against Arkansas State, ULA, and Missouri. So that's another easy one I think that Alabama could get to, if not eclipse that with maybe possibly 3.
Hey, let's talk defense a little bit for a pick or a prediction here. For the first time in 8 games, an Alabama safety will intercept a pass, Charlie. Deontay Thompson and Xavier McKinney in the month of September produced multiple interceptions. They've now gone October, November, the SEC championship game, and into the college football playoff without one. What do you think? One of those guys get a pick tomorrow night?
That would certainly help. I think they're capable. I think that Kyler Murray and company will probably throw toward the left side of the formation, at least from Alabama's defensive perspective, towards Savion Smith, because that's just what teams have done, and I think that's a testament to what Patrick Surtain has done. But it depends on the coverages and things like that. You have Deontay Thompson and Xavier McKinney are able to roam free back there, and even Jared Maiden in dime. One of those safeties will have a good chance of picking the ball off. But Kyler Murray's an accurate passer. I mean, he's going to be the best quarterback Alabama has played this season. I think if they can get pressure on him, not necessarily flush him from the pocket, but just force him into throws, they're going to have a good chance to do that. And I know that's certainly a top priority. So I think that the safeties back there are going to have some opportunities. And they've come close. Several of the defensive backs have actually come close. Shaheem Carter has missed a couple, but they haven't been able to pick them off lately. I think they could, with what Oklahoma's going to do, unless they're just able to keep them off the field, with how much they've aired out and everything like that, they're going to have plenty of opportunities. So I think one of those guys could come down the board. Yeah.
All right, let's get a prediction from you, Charlie. Give us a score. Give us kind of your perception of how this game is going to play out tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. A lot of the games this season you can get a good feel for, and I don't have necessarily a good feel if I think Alabama's going to win one way or the other, but I think Alabama's going to win just because of what we were talking about earlier. I think both these offenses are incredible to watch. I think it's going to be a lot of fun early, and you look at the other side of the ball, something that doesn't get mentioned a lot. I know a lot of the defensive players have talked about how they're kind of motivated a little bit by the shootout talk and things like that. Alabama's defense is good. Oklahoma's is not. I think with defensive coaches like Nick Saban and Tosh Lupoi and Pete Golding, those guys are going to be able to make adjustments at halftime and shut things down a little bit, or at least figure out some ways to keep, for the dam from breaking in terms of Oklahoma's offense. And, I think that, that we've talked a lot this season. You've heard from other coaches. Some of you even said it. One of those magic numbers is you got to score about 34 to 35 points to beat Alabama. And that may be the case, but I don't think that's the case this year with this offense. So I think Oklahoma can get to that number because of their offense. I'll give them 35 points, but I'm with you. I think they're going to score about 48, 49. It's going to be right there on that spread. I'd probably go with 48 just to make some degenerates a little unhappy. But I think that Alabama's going to be able to win this one in the second half just because of the adjustments they make at halftime, and they'll be competing for another national championship if they do.
Yeah, at 48, you can figure on that missed extra point, right? So that
Exactly.
It's not 2 field goals. I'm figuring with my 48. I'm figuring on a missed extra point. That's how I came to 48 points for Alabama. Hey, Charlie, can't thank you enough, my man. Great work as always at BamaOnline.com. Be sure to check out Charlie's great stuff at BOL. You can also follow him on Twitter at Charlie_Potter, Potter. It's Charlie Potter at BamaOnline.com. Thanks a lot, Charlie.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.